guys, welcome back to the Shannon Show. So today's video is going to be a review of 13 Reasons Why Season 3. Obviously it's probably one of the most controversial shows on Netflix and we've all been awaiting Season 3. I guess the big thing that happened last season was obviously the whole Tyler situation. Obviously he was sexually assaulted by Monty and his boys, and then he was basically going to shoot up the whole school, but Clay stopped him. And it kind of ended with it all in disarray. The cop cars were coming and we kind of didn't know what was going to happen next. Then obviously when the trailer came out, I was thinking it was going to center like solely around that, like the whole season was going to be centered around Tyler and what happens next, and you know, perhaps seeing if he does choose to press allegations against Monty, or whether he decides to keep it quiet, whether he still becomes the school shooter, whether he's just like, you know, I'm just going to try it again another day. But obviously when the trailers came out, it was all about Bryce, and they basically let us know right away that the whole season was going to be based around Bryce Walker's death and who killed him. So I was thinking it's going to be like a murder mystery thing. And I was quite interested. I was interested to see where it went. And then when I was watching the trailers, obviously there's a whole new bitch in the trailer, like there's a whole new character. And some of the characters, the old characters, I don't know all of them. All I know is Sherry, the poet guy, the one that she did poetry with, and Marcus are not in this season. So a lot of the characters have either been written out or been chopped, or have decided to leave because of other products. I'm thinking maybe it's the budget. Obviously I think they put a lot of production in, a lot of money into 13 Reasons Why, so maybe they were just like, you know, to save some budget, why don't we just cut some characters out? I don't know. The whole 13 Reasons Why was based on the book, which is based around Hannah Baker, but she doesn't really come up. She is not in this season whatsoever, not even the ghost of her really. I think there's just like one mini clip that we see as a flashback, and she's kind of loosely mentioned within there, but it's basically moved away from the book and Hannah Baker really. It's kind of become its own thing. But we also know that this is the penultimate season. There's only going to be one more season left, and I think that's probably the smart thing to do. I think a lot with the teen dramas, they drag on a bit, like everybody looks like they're 30 years old, like it's not realistic that they are in high school anymore. And also the storylines kind of drag out. I feel like we're kind of seeing almost like a repeat of the things going on, so I think it was a smart move to kind of end it with season 4. I feel like a lot of shows, cough cough Riverdale, should follow suit. We're introduced to this new girl, and I think everyone who watched the trailer was like, who the hell is this new girl, like who is she? And then second of all, she obviously had a British accent, and I just find it so weird when like the whole cast is American and then there's like this one British actor, and it took a while to get used to it. Even with Sabrina, obviously her cousin Ambrose is British. It took me a while to get used to it. I feel like it took me till like halfway till I was used to like her being British and everyone else being American. So this new girl, she has a little backstory. Her mum's a nurse, and yeah, her mum's a nurse, and she cares for Bryce's grandfather, and she's living within Bryce's house. And she is the so-called new girl, and she says that she kind of has like, because she's new, she's kind of just been observing everyone, and so she is the all-knowing, all-seeing. And we basically see her in the interrogation room, and she's also the narrator of the season as well. So we do see a lot of her in there, and I feel like it's so strange to see so much of a new character, especially in season 3 of all places. Season 2 okay, but season 3 just to like throw in like a whole new character. I've literally never seen her before, and she gets so, and she's like such a like big part of the series. It's quite strange really. We know that Bryce is dead and we're all thinking who killed him, but the main thing that is kind of the bridge from last season is the whole Tyler situation. Obviously we learned that Tony and Tyler successfully drive away. Tony helps dispose of the guns. He throws them in the river. Kind of a rookie move, but he throws them in the river. And Clay, you know, he has this kind of savior complex, and he's like, they don't know what's happened to him at this point yet, but Clay has this savior complex, and he's like, oh, we're gonna help Tyler, and we're gonna save him, and we're gonna make sure he doesn't go down this road of destruction. And he even goes to the trouble of making this schedule to make sure that Tyler always has a companion and a friend with him, and that he's never lonely. We also learn that Tyler intended, I don't know, it's kind of unclear what he was going to do. We kind of don't know if he was going to go in there and shoot the guys that assaulted him, or whether he was just going to, you know, shoot indiscriminatively. Yeah, pronunciation is off, but you know what the word I'm talking about. Yeah, it just seems like he was just gonna shoot up everybody. Like, he might save a friend or two. Like, if you know somebody, you probably won't shoot them. But it sounded like he was just gonna let his chopper sing and shoot everybody up. But we don't really know which one it was. But we do know that he basically did. Obviously, we see at the end. But he did write a note, and he did do the kind of school shooter-esque, mass murder-esque confession / apology video where he explains what his reasons are, what his motives are, and that his sorry and goodbye. So he was planning on actually committing suicide after carrying out the attack if he was successful at it. And also what's interesting is that his parents are absolutely oblivious. Like, his parents had absolutely no idea. Like, I don't even think till like by the end they actually knew that Tyler even owned a gun, let alone was planning to shoot up the school. And I've, you know, with the whole gun control debate in America, I've seen a lot of people saying, you know, obviously white male shooters, a lot of people are saying, you know, the parents are responsible, and they need to be like in their children's business. Kind of like, how can you as a parent be oblivious that your son is a potential mass murderer? Like, they kind of threw it in there, but it was just kind of something that I noticed. They kind of just threw it in there. They didn't really take it really further. It would have been interesting to see how the parents would have reacted, but we didn't get to see that. It also goes to show that a lot of parents don't know what their kids are getting up to. Bryce is dead, he goes missing, and then his body ends up washed up by the pier, and then he's dead. So I'm just going to break it down. Before, obviously, we know at the end that it was revealed. It would have been, really, anyone could have been the suspect, but I feel like if we're looking at it as character-wise, I kind of just did a little breakdown of the characters and their motives and how likely it could have been that they were the killer. Obviously, Zach was an obvious suspect. Bryce was jealous of him. Bryce was jealous that he was captain. Bryce actually broke his knees, which basically put him out of action. Obviously, his career was thinking he was going to get a school scholarship, and that way he was going to fund his college. Bryce basically fucked him up with that one, like, broke his knees. And I think he'd already had a knee surgery, and he was recovering from that. And then, obviously, Bryce just took the piss and broke his knees. On top of that, Zach had a relationship with Chloe, which was Bryce's ex, and they obviously had broken up. Bryce took that quite badly. They both said that they both told everybody that Bryce couldn't have known, Bryce didn't know. But obviously we do know that Bryce did know, and I already knew straight away, like, of course Bryce knew. Like, why would he break your knees? Like, obviously those were all the things that Bryce needed to give him, like, the motivation, give Bryce motive to break Zach's knees. And then obviously that has just, like, basically, like, ruined, like, the biggest prospect of his life. So that would have been strong enough motive for Zach to kill him. And I kind of thought that he kind of had a medium to high chance of being Bryce's killer. Then obviously another suspect is, of course, linking into Zach, Chloe. Chloe broke up with Bryce. Bryce took it quite badly, but Chloe states that Bryce did leave her alone. As we see throughout the series, Bryce has a trouble with leaving people alone. I wouldn't buy that Bryce would have left Chloe alone. Obviously, we don't actually see that. Obviously, Chloe's storyline is pretty much centered around her abortion. So obviously, she's having a relationship with Zach. She was having Bryce's baby. She didn't tell Bryce about the abortion. Obviously, she told everybody that she never told him, but obviously we know now that she did. But obviously, the whole kind of secrecy thing, like her having an abortion, her having his, you know, potentially a baby, his baby, obviously he has a control issue. So that probably, if he had found out about that, maybe he would have confronted her about it, confronted about like why she's hanging around with Zach, why was Zach there at the abortion, it should have been me. That could have been a whole confrontation, and then that probably maybe Chloe would have snapped, like she's just remembering all of the stuff that she's dealt with him, and she might have snapped and killed him. So she could have potentially been a killer too, but I feel like the motive, she obviously had motives, but I feel like the likelihood of her being Bryce's killer was quite low. The likelihood of her actually carrying out the murder would have been quite low. Obviously, we know that he was severely beaten. I don't think Chloe would have it in her to really beat Bryce. I think she was just over it at this point. Like she stayed with him, she didn't want to be with him, and she was just happy to just keep her distance from him. Yeah, I think it was quite an interesting take. Obviously, we see the kind of like the issue of abortion there, and her having the abortion, and then her going to a kind of pro-life place that kind of was guilt-tripping her into keeping the baby. And Zach was just there for her, like he offered to raise the baby. He was saying, you know, he'd support her through whatever decision. He came through with the abortion money. Zach is just such a sweetheart, like. And then obviously the other suspect, Jessica, she obviously had a lot of motive. Obviously Bryce is her rapist. On top of that, she's kind of become more active and being like a survivor advocate and being quite vocal, being quite political. She ran for president. She's been quite hard on the jocks, and like she's called out the rape culture in schools and the kind of like misogynistic culture that thrives within boys in school, and specifically sports teams. She planned a protest she wanted the game to be cancelled. Obviously Bryce moved school and his school was VCing Liberty High, and she wanted that game cancelled. The school refused. Then she did like a protest there. Obviously Bryce was there, and then obviously at the game, before the game actually, Bryce texted Jessica saying that he wanted to meet her at the pier, which is basically where his body was found. So it's all looking very suspicious. Obviously we know so at this point, it was just, before it was revealed, it was just looking very suspicious. It was pointing towards Jessica a lot, all throughout the series, all throughout the season. And then of course she was very worried about him now coming back to Liberty High because he had put in an application to transfer back. The motive for Jessica killing Bryce was obviously very high, and I pretty much thought that she was probably going to be at least the person who did it or involved somehow. Justin, of course, another suspect. Of course, he's Bryce is his girlfriend's rapist. He felt partly responsible for the rape and for not doing more to stop it. He's also a drug addict, so he's quite unreliable. He often called on Bryce when he needed help for things with money and drugs, and perhaps sometimes those type of relationships when you're dependent on somebody to get your next high can be quite volatile and turn quite violent. So there was motive there. But I personally wouldn't think that Justin would have done it because, you know, he has a soft spot for Bryce, and he was visibly upset when it was revealed that Bryce died, and he's always said, you know, he was my friend, he was the only person who cared for me, He's done so much for me. So I didn't think that it was going to be Justin, and I would have been very surprised if it was revealed to be him. Tyler, of course, he was the school shooter, but I feel like he obviously, even though he just kind of like fits the description, we see that obviously we know that Bryce knew about the whole shooter situation but didn't say anything, but had been saying it, announcing it as if like, I've kept it a secret but I could snitch. So Tyler could have had motive there to take him out, to stop him from talking. And of course Monty alluded to the fact that Bryce was responsible for the assault that happened to him, and that nothing that they do doesn't happen without Bryce's say-so. Bryce denies it and said that he had nothing to do with it, and was actually quite sympathetic to Tyler, and basically said, you know, don't worry about it, I'm going to make sure that he doesn't hurt you again. And Tyler seemed very appreciative of that. So because of that, I didn't think that Tyler would be in any way, shape or form responsible. I feel like after the whole school shooter situation, he was quite sheltered, and he just kind of wanted to better himself rather than go back to the violence. Obviously he did have his moments, but I feel like the risk was quite low. Alex, obviously he has multiple, obviously he has motive as well. Obviously he was with Jess. He was the one who helped Jess through, her whole ordeal, like her dealing with her trauma, because of Bryce. But he does start hanging out with him again, and they have like a few nights together. They, you know, do lots of drugs together. They visit a prostitute together. So they've been hanging out, chilling. Like, you know, when they started hanging out, I was just like, do you remember like that Bryce is a monster? But they were hanging out, and then eventually I feel like Alex just kind of realizes that Bryce is this monster, and I feel like a lot of people get sucked back into within Bryce's sphere, especially the boy characters, the male characters, because he has this money and he has this lifestyle, and you know, you can forget about your life when you're enjoying his luxuries. So I feel like he was in that space where he was forgetting about Bryce as a trash human being. Obviously once he realizes that, obviously his wake-up call again is when they break into that house and they scare that little kid, and he just remembers how evil Bryce is. And then also on top of that, he's on steroids. He's been using a lot of steroids to deal with his breakup with Jessica. He's got a lot of body hang-ups. He thinks perhaps maybe if he was a bit more bulkier, he'd be more attractive to maybe Jessica and other women. So he's been using steroids, and steroids, the side effects of that are obviously being aggressive and irritable. And then obviously maybe one day he could have snapped and killed Bryce. But I actually thought that the risk of him killing Bryce would actually be quite low. I just feel like Alex wouldn't be, even though he was on steroids, I don't feel like he would necessarily kill someone. Maybe throw a punch, but I didn't think he would necessarily be the killer. And then obviously the next suspect is obviously Monty. We know that he can be very violent. Obviously we know he's in the closet. He's very conflicted about his sexuality. I think that he knows, that Bryce knows. And obviously after the whole situation with Tyler, Bryce basically tells him, lay off or I'm going to expose all of your dirty laundry, all of your illegal stuff. Everyone's going to know about it. Obviously he kind of felt like betrayed by that, because it's like, why are you putting this guy Tyler before me? He felt betrayed by that, and obviously he probably felt a bit emasculated by that as well, like somebody telling you what to do. So, you know, how are you going to stop somebody from controlling you? You take him out. So obviously I felt like, and it kept going back to him as well. So I was thinking there's a good chance it could be him as well. And then obviously there's Clay. He has probably the most, one of the highest motives, the most motives to kill Bryce. Obviously, he loved Hannah. Bryce was his rapist. Bryce was a key reason of why she killed herself. He's threatened to kill Bryce on multiple occasions. He's actively sought out against him, tried to fight him on multiple occasions, tried to take him down. He also kind of felt like he had gotten off easy with the 6-month suspension. And he just hates his guts. And then, of course, obviously, his new love interest, Arnie, he sees Bryce and Arnie getting close. Obviously, in the beginning, we see him kind of lie to the police and say he didn't know that Bryce and Arnie had a relationship, but we later learned before Bryce's death, he actually saw them kissing. So there was this kind of motive there, kind of just like, you know, how are you this kind of horrible human being, but yet living this easy, lush life? But I kind of knew that they wouldn't take it there. I just feel like Clay is their wholesome character, and I just feel like they wouldn't take it there. I wish that they did, but I just know that they would have been safe and not taking it there. Another suspect, Hannah's mum. Hannah's mum, she comes back on the scene. She was actually in town in the whole weekend where Bryce died. She met up with Clay a couple times, and Bryce actually did try and meet up with her and apologise. She wasn't having it. She was basically saying, you know, you always have blood on your hands. She wasn't feeling his apology. And one night when she was visiting Hannah's grave, and Hannah's mum gets drunk, and she basically leaves a voicemail on Clay's phone the night of Bryce's murder, basically saying that he doesn't deserve to like come back into the community, and that she wishes that she was dead and that she wants to kill him. And then obviously Hannah's mum was acting very shady. I feel like she was trying to point fingers at Tony, and she was also telling Clay like, you need to save yourself, but also asking him not to delete the voicemail, like delete incriminating information. So Hannah's mum was looking a bit dodgy, but I feel like that would have been a very easy character to pin the murder on. But she obviously had very high motives as well, and they could have very well picked her to be the killer. Obviously, another suspect is Miss Walker. A lot of people are thinking maybe we should be looking at her. She did have a lot of negative things to say about her son. She was constantly warning people, like she knew that Chloe was pregnant and basically said like, my son's a monster, don't have his baby. And you know, she was warning Arnie not to get close to him, but at the same time you could see that she was still trying with her son, and that she wanted him to get better, she wanted him to get help. But then we also saw a lot of like him not getting him refusing to get help, or being stubborn about it, and she was getting frustrated. So who knows, it could have been you know, one of those things like the mother's had enough, you know, the son's embarrassed the family, he's a monster, let's just put everyone, the world would be a better place without him, let me just kill him. But I do feel like she did love her son, so I didn't think that she had personally done it. She was a bit suspicious, but I think that deep down she obviously loved her son. Obviously there's Mr. Walker as well. He's kind of the absent father. He's divorcing Mrs. Walker. He's got a mistress. He's got an illegitimate child. Bryce and him have a rocky relationship because Bryce kind of feels neglected by him. And he had been very antagonistic to his father. You know, he went to his house, he destroyed his property, he insulted his girlfriend or his mistress or his new woman, he insulted her. And also the dad wanted to keep the investigation on the hush. It was his mum that was pushing for them to be a full investigation, where the dad would have been happy if no charges were brought against anyone who showed up late to the funeral. And he just didn't seem that upset. It's almost as if like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. So that would have been interesting too. But I feel like even though he didn't like his son, like he didn't care enough for his son to actually kill him. He just didn't care whether he was dead or alive. And then obviously the last suspect is Arnie herself. She's been a bit of a messy narrator. She was telling loads of lies to the police. She made it seem like Clay was this like obsessive, possessive person. And yeah, he is. He has got a lot of possessive, controlling qualities about him. But at first she made it seem to the police that he was obsessed with her, and she had never let on that she fancied him, like even though she had kissed him. And she also said that she didn't have a relationship with Bryce, even though she did. So she did lie a bit, and she was putting like, I feel like at one point it felt like she was trying to frame Clay. So she was looking very suspicious. I guess she came through at the end, but she was looking very suspicious. And I feel like, but I also thought like they wouldn't have brought this whole girl and made her the narrator and then made her the killer, and then she wouldn't be here for next season. So I didn't think it was her, but I feel like it would have been interesting if it was her, and if she was like this unreliable narrator that turned out to be the killer. What would her motive to kill Bryce? She had nice words to say about Bryce. You know, she said, you know, he can change. She had a relationship with him, but we also see near the end of their relationship, even though on the night that he died, they kissed, he was starting to get possessive of her. Like, he grabbed her up one time. So who knows what happened behind closed door, whether I don't think he like hit her or anything, and he didn't rape her, but it was getting quite controlling, their relationship. It was getting to that point. So there could have been motive there. Maybe he was being excessively controlling. She freaked out. She remembered he was a rapist and killed him. So, obviously, we find out who it is at the end. And at first, obviously, they make it seem like it was Zach who did it. Obviously, Zach, he's just been being very depressed. We kind of think it's just about his leg and his career perspectives going down the pan. But then he basically tells Alex that he killed him. And then it started to kind of make sense, because some of the stuff that he had said was suspicious, and I feel like when I kind of knew it was gonna be him who was the killer, or made to look like the killer, is when he was in the locker room and he had said something like, oh, this person, he wouldn't have been able to take on Bryce. It would have been a 6-foot monster would have had to take him on. And he was talking to someone who clearly did not look 6 foot. So I was thinking, wait, is he telling us that he did it? And then on top of that, at his funeral, it was just, his speech was a bit off, and he said like sorry twice. And I was like, I'm not gonna pin. I think maybe they're just putting it in there so he looks a bit suspicious. But I was like, they are not gonna pin murder on my man Zach. They're not gonna pin it on my baby Zach. They're just not. So then when he admitted it, I was like, oh, no. Like, Zach has been such a good boy these past seasons. Why would you punish him like this? And then what I also found suspicious was Alex. Alex was very nonchalant, because basically Zach was like, I need to confess. It's unfair that Clay's there when he's innocent. I can't let an innocent man go down. And then Alex was just like, oh, you know, wait a minute, just let it play out. Like, he was just like, you know, don't say anything till we're in court and they're about to say the guilty verdict, then confess. And Alex kind of had a point, like, you know, but it seemed like the sheriff's office was hell-bent on pinning it with someone. Like, they knew they weren't going to be able to get away with a cold case. Like, someone is going to have to be held responsible because of the amount of influence that the Walkers have. So when Alex was like, oh, just let it play out, I was suspicious. And then I kind of thought, maybe, because I was thinking, Zach is not a killer. Like, he's not a killer. I'm thinking maybe he attacked him, he left him for dead, and then somebody finished him off. That's what I thought had happened. Then obviously he goes to the station, he confesses, and they basically say, like, you left him and he was alive. It basically sounds like you just roughed him up, and that wouldn't actually, that would just be assault and battery. But they don't charge him with anything, so Zach gets off scot-free. So I was like, yeah, you know, your knees are fucked up, but you ain't going to jail. Case. So, yeah, so then after that, it was like, well, who is it then? And then I'm thinking, maybe it's Arnie, because she lies to the police and says that she was with Clay. That was her alibi. I'm thinking, but where was she? She never actually said where we never really established where she said that she was the night of Bryce's murder. So I'm thinking maybe she's using Clay as an alibi to cover her own back, and she was the one who finished Bryce off. So then I'm thinking, or maybe it really was Monty. But then we see that Monty had an alibi. Obviously, we had seen him before in the series. He'd had like a hookup, like a very aggressive, like projecting hookup, and he basically saw that guy again and they hooked up. So that was his alibi. But Monty basically pins everything on Monty. But Arnie basically pins everything on Monty. But we learn that it was actually Alex and Jessica who finished. Well, Alex finished the job, and Jessica basically was there as a witness. So obviously we see the text. What was it? Bryce asked Jessica to meet. He's on this whole like, I'm a changed man, closure shit. So he asked Jessica to meet him. So she was like, why would I meet you in the dark by yourself? Like, you are my rapist. Like, why would I meet you? And she's like, bring a friend. So she brings Alex, and obviously they find him. Obviously Zach fucked Bryce up. Good jab, broken leg, bleeding, everything. So they were just, he gives Jessica this tape, which is an apology tape, and after that he's like, you know, help me, like, you know, can you help me, like, I'm pretty fucked up here. And Jessica's, no, let's leave him out here in the cold, yeah. And I think, I'm not sure, Jessica kind of thought maybe he'd die, but she definitely thought he was going to be, at least like get frostbite or something, you know, suffer out in the cold at least. Alex decides he's going to be the good Samaritan and help him up, and then once he helps him up, Bryce just goes on this rant. He threatens Jessica, he threatens Zach. He's like, I'm gonna ruin all of you guys' lives, like, just see, because obviously he's thinking maybe it was a setup, because obviously Zach beat him up, but of course Zach had his own reasons to beat him up, so he's just being very abusive. And then Alex is just kind of thinking, like, this guy was chatting the most shit, like saying he's changed and all of this shit, and here he is threatening us. Like, this guy is the fucking devil. Like, he's put us all through so much shit. Fuck this guy. And then basically pushes him over the pier. Obviously he falls into the pier and he's just kind of drowning. He's asking for help, and at that point it's like, should we help him or not? And they basically leave him to drown. Basically they don't call for help, and that is how Bryce died. So it was a pretty horrible death, really. Beaten and then drowned. I wouldn't want to die that way, baby. Coincidentally, Monty, who has been jailed, obviously Tyler gave a statement to the police and he was arrested. He coincidentally, miraculously, on the same day that Arnie comes in to give the false statement, he ends up dead. And then obviously the police person in charge, you know, the sheriff or the deputy, is Alex's dad. And I think it's pretty clear that Alex's dad knew that Alex had some involvement in Bryce's death and was happy to go along with this Monty story to save Alex's ass, because we do see him spurning some suspicious items. So I'm thinking he definitely knew that Alex was involved and went along with Arnie's alibi story. After, they have this whole kumbaya support group moment where they listen to Bryce's tape and he basically apologizes. And I guess it's supposed to be like a closure moment. So he apologizes to Hannah, he apologizes to Jessica, and he apologizes to like Zach and some other people. I think he apologizes to Clay, yeah, and some other people, and his mum and stuff. So yeah, they play that. And then after that, seems like a happy ending. Tyler's doing well. He has this photo exhibit, and the potential issues that kind of are foreshadowed for the final season. Obviously, Monty's hookup / boo knows that Arnie gave a false statement, and he does confront her, but we don't know whether he's going to say anything or not, because it's the perfect situation right now. But you know, the final season, who knows what shit's going to happen, because they're going to try and pull something out the bag. Also, of course, we see that scene of that fisherman who basically reels out Tyler's guns. So they've been found. Is he going to give them into the police? Is he going to use them for himself? Probably going to give them into the police, and who knows, because Alex's dad knows about the whole school shooter information. I guess he's just keeping it hush-hush because his son's involved, but who knows what could happen. And then obviously some kind of key storylines within the film. Obviously Jessica becoming this kind of survivor's advocate, and her whole like activism journey, and we have this really beautiful scene at the end where she gives a speech, obviously addressing the errors in her activism, but also still, making sure to address the rape culture within the school. And she says, I'm a survivor. She says her name, and she's a survivor, and then all of the other survivors of like sexual trauma and sexual assault stand up, and Justin actually stands up, and then we learn his story. And I think an important point to make is she was like, I stand with you, and also the people who are still sitting down, and the people who are still sitting down and not ready to tell their stories yet, I stand with you too. And I feel like that was a really beautiful moment. Also, we also see her, because obviously she's been struggling with sex because of her sexual trauma, and we see her kind of like exploring her sexuality and exploring what she likes by herself, because I feel like a lot of the time when women think of like can you hurry please? I haven't got that much battery left. When people think about like sexual pleasure within women, it's usually associated with a partner. So I think, are you washing your plate, Jared? For fuck's sake, like, why are you so annoying? I think it's an important message to send, that you don't actually need to rely on anybody else for your own sexual pleasure. And that you should explore your own sexual desires, and you don't actually need a partner to do that. You can literally just do it by yourself. So I feel like that was really interesting as well, because I feel like, especially in kind of like teen-centered films, sex is generally just about like the experience with somebody rather than by yourself and having control of your own body. And obviously Tyler is literally really beautifully done. Like, Tyler's performance was so good. Like, that was award-winning stuff. Tyler's character had like the best performance within the whole season, like and probably in all of the seasons. I feel like Tyler's transformation and his whole portrayal of his character of somebody who has suffered trauma and is trying to overcome that was really powerful, really realistic. It really did the subject matter justice, and I feel like that his performance was pretty much the highlight of the season for me. We also see Justin and Jessica reconcile. Obviously they've had a rocky relationship. At first it starts off as just a hookup, then Jessica breaks up with Alex, and then they get back together. They keep it quite secretive, but then they decide to go public. I low-key stand them. I low-key have a soft spot for them together. But obviously at her kind of support group for survivors of like sexual assault and sexual trauma, they do kind of call her out, like, you know, how are you like an advocate for us when you're dating the person who essentially let you get raped? And sis had a point, but you know, as Jessica said, she's a grown person and she can make her own decision and she can love who she wants. So what do you think about Jessica and Justin? Do you ship them together, or do you feel like, you know, why is she being with somebody who essentially let her get raped? Personally, I wouldn't be in a relationship with somebody who let me get violated like that. But, you know, on screen, you know, even though he's, you know, a drug addict and whatever, the relationship seems cute. I do definitely feel sorry for Alex. Obviously, he was with Jessica through all of her trauma. He really held it down for her. He even killed Bryce. And we see, obviously, he's very insecure about himself. He like basically takes his he interprets his misfortune in love as something to do with his body, and he's trying to bulk up, and he starts using steroids, and then we see the effects of steroid use. And I think it was quite interesting. It would be more interesting if we could see that develop next season, because body dysmorphia affects men in just as big numbers as it does women, and you know, steroid use is a big problem especially within like teenage boys who are trying to uphold this image of the perfect male body. So I think that would definitely be something interesting to see next season if they carry on, because I think he is still taking steroids. So that would be interesting to see that, and also see the longer term effects of steroid use, because we do see him being very aggressive and very erratic, which are the side effects of steroid use. One big issue that I had with this season, which I think is going to cause a lot of controversy, is the humanizing of Bryce, and like how, you know, we see him, he's depressed, he's getting bullied at school because he's a rapist and he doesn't fit in, and he's trying to change, and he's really trying to change, and you know, we should, you know, give him a chance. And like this running theme that went on throughout the film was, he didn't deserve to die, he didn't deserve to die. Honestly, I wouldn't say he deserved to die, but did he deserve to live? Really? Like, what do you think? Does anyone think that Bryce deserved to die? And does anyone buy that he was actually changing? I feel like there was like such mixed messages going on with the whole Bryce situation, because they were like, oh, he was changing, he was trying to do right, but then it's just like the information that we've been given basically says that he hasn't. He made this confession tape that's meant to be like the closure and him showing that he was trying to change, and then literally on the same night he broke somebody's legs, like ruined their whole career prospect, broke their legs. He literally admitted to his therapist that he was having rapey thoughts when he was having consensual sex with somebody. So, and basically saying, is he going to have these thoughts the rest of his life? Is he going to be a rapist the rest of his life? Basically alluding to the fact that like it's almost ingrained within him, like it's just an instinct for him to violate women. And then we also see him getting very obsessive with Arnie, and yeah, just being overall shady, and just like the evil stuff that he did, like scaring that kid into peeing his pants. Yeah, he did some good things, but you know, the bad outweighs the good for me personally. So what do you think? Do you feel like they were trying to humanize him as a rapist? And I feel like the thing is, it's not even like it was just one victim, or it was a situation where you know, the girl didn't say anything, or it was a blurred line kind of things. Like he fully said on the tape, I heard you say no, but I carried on because I wanted to. And we're meant to like have sympathy for this guy, we're meant to feel sorry for him. I don't feel sorry for Bryce or Bryce's character or the representation of Bryce's character. He literally said on the confession tape that he raped like multiple digits of women, and we're meant to like feel sorry for this character, feel sympathy, feel like if he had carried on living he would have made a difference in the world, or he would have changed. What do you think? Do you feel like Bryce, if he was a real human being and not just fiction, would have had the potential to redeem himself and really change and not be a serial rapist and not rape every person he's with? Or do we feel like he would have eventually harmed another woman? What do we think? And do we feel like the writers of this season, or whoever is running this show, was trying to humanize Bryce? And what did you kind of think about it? I feel like there was so much of him in this season, like way too much, like it overshadowed everything. And like we saw a lot of his parents and stuff, and a lot of his mother, and honestly I didn't care to see what his mother was going through. I really just didn't care. But yeah, let me know what you think. Do you feel like Bryce's portrayal was problematic? I think it was, and it really annoyed me. And yeah, I feel like it cheapened the quality of the series. And then also the whole therapy scene, like him saying like, oh, he was a lonely child, and that, you know, he only had material things and he never had maternal love. And I'm thinking, so is this all an excuse now? Does that now justify him being this rapist, this serial rapist? I just don't understand. Like, and then also it's just kind of like, are we uplifting the victims here, or are we giving space to rapists? Like, I'm so confused right now. I'm so confused. Like most of the season, like, you know, and that's why I'm feeling like, is all of this whole praising survivors thing, is it all bogus? Because, you know, in terms of activism, like, you know, activism 101, you amplify the voice, but they literally just dedicated like the majority of the screen time to us seeing this serial rapist try and gain redemption. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this kind of section of the season. Do we feel sorry for Monty? Because obviously we see this scene where he basically tells his dad, who comes to visit him, who is abusive anyway, that he is gay. His dad basically says all of this abusive stuff to him and spits on him, and then literally the next day he's dead. And obviously he's very upset by that situation. Do we feel sorry for him? Because he too is a rapist or a sexual assaulter at the very least. Did we feel sorry for Monty in that moment? I'd have to say no. I get that he's going through this struggle and stuff like that, and he's internalized his sexuality. You know, even though we do live in a world that is more progressive, you know, a lot of people and a lot of people's families are very traditionalist, and it's still hard for people to come out. But I'm sorry, I don't feel sorry for him. I really don't. He was a fucking terrorist. Of course, Arnie, this new character, I'm not really sold on her. I just feel like her appearance on this season was pretty non-essential. I don't understand why she was made this main character. I feel like the season could have functioned without her, to be honest, and I'm really confused as to why she's been brought in, to be honest. But what do you guys think? Do you feel like she was a good addition to the show, or are you a bit confused as to why she's been added in? Also surrounding that, there was a lot of like awkward jokes from Clay's character, like, and Justin's character, like, oh, do you speak African? And oh, I didn't want to say this because I didn't want to seem racist. And I'm just like, none of this stuff was written into the script when we were talking about Jessica, but now because we have somebody who's not playing an African American, somebody who's playing somebody of like they came from Africa, they were born from Africa, now we're making all of these racial jokes. I don't understand. I felt like that was very forced, and I just feel like they shouldn't continue that for the next season. It just felt a bit of, the comedy felt a bit awkward. It also brings up the conversation of activism Is there a good and bad type of activism? Obviously, the activism, protesting at Bryce's funeral, is that a respectable protest? Is that a bit tacky? Is that a bit too radical? Personally, I wouldn't personally protest at my rapist's funeral. I feel like, even though even though somebody might have harmed me in any sort of way, or violated me in any sort of way, they are still like somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's sister, and they should be, their family should be allowed to mourn them in peace. But if somebody has broken you down and hurt you so much and you're so angry, I can understand why somebody might want to protest at your funeral. But I don't think that's technically activism anyway. It's not really activism, you're just kind of screaming at somebody's grave, and then on top of that, they can't really hear you, so all you're really harming is their family rather than them, because they're dead. And then on top of that, we also see, the type of activism, I've seen a lot of people quite critical of like feminists who protest by like taking off their clothes or taking off their top. They kind of just feel like it's a bit pointless. Personally, each to their own. I feel like it does spread awareness, but it's not particularly the strategy I would go for. And I feel like sometimes when you do like elaborate things like taking off your top or doing an underwear feminist march, a lot of people who you're trying to get through to, they're so close-minded that they won't see it through. Like, I will just see you as the feminists too much in their underwear, and I feel like the only people who will get your message, in most cases, the only people who would get your message in cases of fellow feminists and allies. So yeah, I just feel like most of the time you're getting through to a brick wall with that type of activism. But like I said, I think it definitely does raise awareness, but it wouldn't be my choice of activism. Another kind of question that it brings up, obviously mass murders and school shooters and stuff have been a hot topic, especially in America. I feel like the series kind of puts forward an argument that perhaps maybe if we're nice to that person who's most likely to be the school shooter, because I feel like in every school, there's whispers around, oh, he's going to be the school shooter, oh yeah, he's going to be the school shooter. Kind of puts forward that argument that instead of like maybe bullying them or ostracizing them or not making an effort to be friendly with them, that making an effort to be friendly with these people, making sure that these people don't feel, these particular students don't feel isolated amongst other students, is the best way to perhaps prevent somebody from becoming a school shooter, or feeling like this is the only way that they can take power and be powerful. I feel like obviously a lot, life would be more enjoyable if people were nice and people were kind. My school experiences were not particularly enjoyable all the time, but I don't think it should fall necessarily on other kids. I don't think you should be going to school. I don't think you should be going to school and thinking, I need to speak to this person so that they don't shoot up the whole school. But what do you think? Do you feel like, more children or more teenagers should make a conscious effort to make sure that all of their peers, or if there is a particular problem peer, make sure that they don't feel isolated to prevent school shootings? What are we kind of thinking about that? Or do we feel like if there is somebody who's looking like they should be a school shooter, we should just kind of send them to a program or defer them to another school or something? What do we think the best solution is if there is a child that is suspected of being a school shooter? What do you think is the best way to kind of deal with that? And do you feel like you know, looking out for that person and making sure that they feel like they're a part of the school community will combat that. I feel like that's what the argument they're putting forward, because I feel like, you know, what we're kind of seeing is that school shooters is either because they're white supremacists, or they have extreme views, or they've been they have been bullied or antagonized or feel unpopular. Interesting to know who you think it should be responsible. Should it be the school's responsibility, or do you think it's the students' responsibility, or do you feel like it's the parents' fault? Who do we think is kind of responsible in this type of situation? So yeah, that is pretty much a roundup. I know this is a long video. Like, I've been trying to cut it down. Like, I used to do like hour reviews before, and I've been trying to cut it down, but there's just like so much to divulge. But anyway, so down to my rating now. Overall, I was a bit disappointed in this season. I was expecting it to be of quality of season 1, season 2. I feel like season 1 was really good. I feel like season 2 again was really good. I was really looking forward to season 3, and it let me down. The writing was not great, really not great. The cinematography, last season was amazing, so good, and like I feel like they didn't even try for this season. I feel like there was a lot of shaky shots. A lot of shots I was just thinking, like, do you actually pay people to do that? I'm thinking, this is the show that's supposed to be getting most of Netflix's money, and this is what you're producing. The colour grading, I feel like they were trying to do something where it was like, you know, the flashbacks were in colour, but now it's all grey and dull. I didn't really like it. Some of the colour grading looked really bad in some shots, and some of the shots came out looking very dark, like I literally couldn't see what was going on. But yeah, overall, I'd give it a rating of 3 out of 5. I think I'll give it a solid 3. It's an alright experience, but it wasn't an enjoyable binge. Like, it wasn't a satisfying binge watch. It felt like a chore watching it. I actually did skip some bits because it was just dragging. Like, the story dragged on longer than it needed to. Like, they could have literally done the season in half the episodes. So yeah, definitely a very long, disappointing season. So yeah, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this season. Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know your thoughts on some of like the messages that they were trying to send. I'm currently on 313 subscribers, and my next short goal is to get to 320. So if you could subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate it. And until next time guys, bye!